Yes, hello. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. In the fight that is facing us, the fight against coronavirus, the priority is clearly health, and that is why we talk to you about that regularly. But we can also not forget another fight that is going to be very important and very hard as well, and that is the economic battle. The problem linked to the coronavirus started by affecting commercial exchanges at the international level. So, of course, we have businesses that import and export. That was the first negative impact on the world economy and on the Quebec economy. However, the measures, and we were very conscious of it, the measures that we took to be able to save lives and to be able to protect the health of Quebecers have had a negative impact on the economy. We knew this, but we were in a situation where we had to choose the lesser of two evils. For example, then we asked people who are 70 and over to not go out of their homes. Of course, there's fewer people consuming, so we don't have to explain that there's a very negative impact on consumption, which is a very important element in the economy. Another important element is investment to businesses. What is important for business investments is to have as much confidence as possible and as little uncertainty as possible. And we have the reverse situation right now. So we have an impact that is very important, that is very negative on investments of companies. I'd like to repeat it. Our priority has been and will continue to be health. But Quebecers have to continue eating, they have to continue living, they have to continue lodging themselves. And for that, we need to have an income, which in certain cases will not be there anymore. So the government is going to be helping out Quebecers, individuals, people. And we have started doing so with Jean Boulet, amongst others, to help people who must isolate themselves and therefore suffer a loss of income. And we have work that continues to be done. So we're having a meeting tonight with the Economy Committee, presided by Éric Girard, to be able to study other measures to help people. Of course, in complementarity as much as possible with the federal government. But we cannot deny right now that many businesses are suffering. And I'll just give you a few examples, but there are entire sectors where it is truly catastrophic. I'm thinking, for example, there nautical, hotels, a lot of different services where there's a drastic loss of income being experienced right now. What is important to tell ourselves today is that the crisis that we are experiencing is a temporary one. At some point, the economy is going to recover. We don't know when. We know that it won't be in the next few weeks. It's going to take a certain number of months. So businesses have to be able to create that bridge so that we have a maximum of our businesses that can get through this crisis, that can get through this difficult period, so that when the economy does relaunch itself, that they be able to do so. So the government is also going to be there to help out businesses. And of course, and I prefer to say it off the bat, we won't be able to save every single business. We are going to do the utmost that it is possible to do with room to maneuver, which is very important, but we won't be able to save every single company. So what we're announcing today is a $2.5 billion program to help out companies that have liquidity problems or which will have liquidity problems associated to the coronavirus situation. Of course, our objective is to do this in complementarity with two other important players. On the one hand, the federal government that announced a $10 billion program yesterday, which remains to be defined, and this program for companies, but also with banks and caisse, which in most cases, at least middle and larger size businesses already have relationships with. So what we wish is to simplify the life of entrepreneurs and CEOs, not ask them to go and knock on 3 different doors, that is to say their bank or their caisse, the government of Quebec, and the federal government. We are trying to make it simpler so that there not be that need to knock at 3 doors. It's not easy, and later I'm going to let the Minister of Economy talk to you where we're at with modalities. But that is an objective that we've been giving ourselves. So to finish, there are 2 things that I wish to tell you. First, Quebecers are lucky to have brilliant men like Éric Girard and Pierre Fitzgibbon and the rest of the economic team. Sincerely, that is really helping. There's a lot of respect from the business world toward the people who are sitting here, and the confidence I was saying earlier on for investments in companies, that is what's most important. So I consider that we are very lucky to have experienced people. Last message, and I know that I'm asking a lot of Quebecers, but I have one more thing to ask of Quebecers. Please, in the next weeks, in the next months, it is more important than ever before to buy products that are made in Quebec. That includes online purchases. More than ever, we have to be able to encourage and help Quebec companies. That is primordial if we wish to give ourselves the possibility that a maximum of our businesses get through this. It's important to buy locally made things in Quebec. So I'm making that request of you. Be careful when it's possible, even online, to buy in Quebec. That will help workers in Quebec. So I would like to start by handing over the mic to the Minister for Finance, who is going to talk to you about this work being done in complementarity with the different groups, such as the federal government. Thank you. So the federal government yesterday announced many measures, including this program for individuals who are not eligible to employment insurance. All of this totaled $27 billion. There was also the adding of liquidities, $55 billion, attached to postponing tax installments and filing income tax, and there was $10 billion of loans or capital to be able to have loans at the different banks, such as the CDB. There's already measures to support the financial sector, and what I want to say is all of this is very positive. I want to mention that is a notable effort. We think that it corresponds to about 4% of the Canadian GDP, that effort. I want to confirm that we are harmonizing the dates for the payment of tax installments and filing tax returns to the 1st of September, injecting a lot of liquidities into the Quebec economy, and we are decreasing the required amounts of the withdrawing done in 2020. That is to help the retirees, and it was announced yesterday by the federal government, and it's normal that we are standardizing ourselves. It's a good thing. It's a good measure, and we are standardizing ourselves, harmonizing ourselves with the federal government. That will cost us approximately $100 million this year. With today's announcement, our support to the economy will total close to $11 billion, so 2.5% of the GDP. It's 470,000 in nominal GDP in 2019 in Quebec. So we are going by step. We want to calibrate our interventions correctly. And today we are giving ourselves the means to act for our businesses. And I'd like to now hand over the mic to my colleague, Pierre. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Mr. Legault. So hello, everyone. I would like to first of all tell entrepreneurs and employees as well as CEOs, we are there to be there for you. Clearly, the situation that we are experiencing is exceptional in nature. It has economic impacts that we haven't seen in a very long time. We're talking about an exogenous, unprecedented shock. The economic crisis that will follow the public health will be severe. A part of the economy it has been entirely stopped. We know very well that some companies already have a problem with liquidities, particularly in the regions. So the government is setting up a measure for emergency help. incorporated in existing programs to be able to support businesses, and this will allow greater efficiency. We're going to be offering loans and loan warranties at a minimum of $50,000 to very advantageous rates to be able to support companies of all sectors of activities. And I'm telling you right away, as Mr. Legault mentioned, there is possibly going to be companies that we will not be able to save. But I think that with a threshold of $50,000, with loan conditions that will be very advantageous, we will cover a lot of companies in their working capital. The key is to be consequent with what the Premier said, is to first of all take care of the citizens that are losing jobs, the social net, and then companies. The program is already set up, and Investissement Québec received and has analyzed many requests already. As of today, in fact, over 600 requests have been made at Investissement Québec. My colleague Éric Girard from the Ministry of Finance has given an initial amount, $2.5 billion, that is available to be able to support businesses in our interventions. But if we need more, we will get more. There are certain criteria that we have established that you will be able to have a look at on the Investissement Québec website, but I can tell you that we are in a solution mode. Generally speaking, there has to be, of course, a causal link with COVID-19. And secondly, one has to be able to show profitability after the pandemic. We're also going to ease the reimbursement conditions for loans that have already been given by Investissement Québec and by the local investment funds, what we call FLEs. So that will help our SMEs regionally. I would also like to mention that the MEEQ has been working for the past week already with the National Bank, with Desjardins, and all other banking institutions to offer coordinated help. The principles have been finalized and we are collaborating very well. The teams are talking on a daily basis. We are, moreover, working on complementary work with the federal government that is managing the assistance program together with the CDB and EDC. I'm in contact with many federal ministers. The details are not yet well known, but we assure that all SMEs in Quebec served by the CDB or EDC will be supported. And advice in the short term, if you have a credit margin or any kind of loan with your financial institution and that you need liquidities, talk first of all to your bank. That will be the quickest. We are organized with all financial institutions to set up warranties in a very swift way. Alternatively, companies can also address themselves to one of the regional offices of Investissement Québec to be able to get more information or to be able to get a loan directly. Companies have to go on the EQ or MEI site starting in a few minutes for general information and to call the number that is on the respective websites. In the last few days, I've been in contact with many CEOs, Le Regroupement d'Affaires, and different associations. I also have vigilance with every bank. I will continue, as well as my teams, to be here and to be attentive to the needs of entrepreneurs in all particular situations because we have to remain very flexible. I would also like to say that certain businesses continue having investment projects and some have requests that are not linked to the coronavirus. We have to remain optimistic. When the economy recovers, it's going to be solid. Companies will have as many liquidity needs as they have right now. And we will be there to help them. I can note that not too long ago we were saying that in globalization, physical distances no longer had any importance. Well, that certainly is still the case. There are many companies that will be able to continue attacking all markets. But the new geopolitical environment favors a very strong domestic economy. Even if it's only in world supply chains, that will make us focus on local supply. And I can confirm to you that this is going to, in great part, dictate our own behavior for our financial interventions. To end with, as M. Legault, I wish to invite Quebecers who will be making purchases in the next few days to keep in mind and their friends and their family and their work. We have to all support one another. We have to buy locally when it's possible. That is also a kind of solidarity. We now will have a question period of about 20 minutes, plus the period reserved for English questions. First, a question from TVA. You are expecting that how many companies might be able to not make it through? I'm sure that you have modelizations. Well, of course, we're in contact with banks, and it has to be understood that there are many regional companies. There are small establishments where there's a great amount of vulnerability. And I think that what is important is that together with my colleague Jean Boulet, we're working a lot on the social net. The, employment insurance, provincial programs, loss of jobs. So many companies are probably going to have to close down for, we hope, only a few weeks, perhaps a few months. I'm not quite sure, but there's 250,000 SMEs in Quebec, and a great part of that group have fewer than 10 employees. I don't have the specific number. As far as the economy, just one question for the first. The same question that I was asking early on today. I understand that we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last, and I get it. But do you have any models? Because there is an impact. You said it early on. It's a huge impact on the Quebec economy. For how long can the Quebec economy support a closure, if you will allow me, such an important economic closure? I think that it is first a question of public health. As soon as that situation has improved, the economy is going to also go better, and there will be a rebound. So when you ask how many companies, how long, at this stage, the answer is something that we don't have, because it's a question of public health. But our role is that while it is extremely difficult to be there and to help the transition, and yes, the economy is being affected hugely right now. But as soon as the situation will improve in terms of public health, the economy will also improve. You were talking about businesses that have or will close their doors. There's also the construction sites that might close down. You saw the unions in the industry are asking for the closure because they say that there's not adequate hygiene or sanitary measures. Can we allow ourselves for everything to be closed? And what do you plan on doing so that the necessary hygiene conditions be respected and they remain active? Minister Jean Boulet had discussions and meetings, as well as Diane Lemieux. We agree to say that on certain construction sites where there were trailers, where people went to eat at lunch or went to wash their hands, that it was not a situation that was ideal in terms of hygiene. We are correcting this situation. So I have great hopes that we'll be able to keep construction sites open. I'd like to have some details on the announcement. You're talking about $2.5 billion. How much of that will go to new loans? You talked also about Investissement Québec that would ease some existing loans. How many millions are we talking about? And third detail. Oh, actually, that's all for now. Okay, one thing that I would like to talk about is that what the banks are doing right now, because some real estate owners are doing this as well. First of all, as Mr. Girard was saying, the health of the banks today is not that of 2008. Today, we can see the bank ease the credit conditions by quite a bit. They changed the financial ratios, moratories on pavements, whether it be for companies or individuals. So we can see that the banks are already involving themselves socially to lighten the burden, because it is clear that we have to be careful, because as I was saying earlier on, I didn't ask Mr. Lacroix the question, but I think that we'll have three phases in the Quebec economy. So the hibernating phase. So there are companies right now that have to hibernate for a few weeks or a few months. We want to be careful. We also don't want to put money to just leave companies sleep. I think it's important in that context to have the social net so that our citizens be able to eat and keep a roof over their heads. And we're going to ask, for example, real estate owners to ease things about rent. I was talking to Charlimont of La Caisse de Dépôt. Ivanhoe Cambridge has announced that they're going to work with SMEs in retail stores to have a 6-month moratorium on rent. So when we're talking about small businesses that don't have to pay salaries because the bank because the government is paying for it and the banks are paying for the rent, well, they might be able to get through. So we first want financial institutions to be able to do the work. And I would say that right now I am amazed with all that we're doing because this is a very strong social problem. Secondly, the banks, when they themselves extend credit to give more credit, they have the ability to see what the needs are so that those are new loans that will add themselves to existing loans, and that is where we will be coming in, sharing majority risk. We'll ask banks to take a certain level of risk because that will allow us to be able to do the work of the banks and to go there directly. We are going to be very quick, very swift. So in our interventions with warranties of loans, it will be new ones. The existing loans will not refinance them. That's a condition that we are giving, and the banks have accepted it. There are cases where the banks are going to come directly to Investissement Québec. That will happen. There are SMEs that might not have banking relationships. That's unlikely, but it is possible. And we also, FLS, the Fonds de Solidarité, and FLI is with us. People who perform very well in the region, we have the entire financial ecosystem which will be used to limit the work of Investissement Québec, because, of course, we do have the issue of access. That is why the CDB and the federal, we want to work really hard to incorporate them to be able to react very quickly so they will all work in complementarity together.
Bonjour, messieurs.
Hello, gentlemen. I would like to hear you on the layoffs of 95% of the Cirque du Soleil employees, and in your envelope, according to the criteria that you have, because you haven't quite defined them, are you going to be able to help the company? That's a good question. I think that when we work with Cirque du Soleil, for example, I'm speaking with Mr. Lamar on a daily basis and have been so since the beginning of the crisis. Of course, we are asking employers to look at the employee aspect. In the case of the Cirque du Soleil, well, next week they have no income, so they had no choice. So the 1,100 employees out of 1,300 are going to go on temporary leave. And we hope that the conditions that were announced yesterday of what could be done are going to be appropriate to allow those people to be able to live. Of course, in the residual, in the case of the SUC, we're going to be involved. This is a company that made money before the crisis and that is going to continue making money as soon as things recover. An interesting fact, the Cirque du Soleil shows in China are starting again at the end of April. So I think that this is an anecdote, if you will, that shows that it's temporary. So China is going back to its activities. So we'd like to think that the same thing is going to be happening here. There are even countries that have mentioned that they wanted to show the shows in July. So yes, we're going to help the Cirque du Soleil to make sure that the liquidities after the layoffs are sufficient so that they can survive during that period of time. You spoke of a certain companies that still have projects. Probably there aren't that many, but perhaps I'd like to have a few examples and how to make sure that they don't end up behind the lineup of all the ones that are having problems. Well, first of all, I have 2 or 3 for example, the paper industry. This has gotten a lot of problems, but the renewal of equipments and the projects for added value. There's one in particular. I'm not going to name the company, but there's one in particular that since there's a loss of employees, the owner called me and said, "I'd like to do my project right away," and we want to encourage them. These are projects that are really separate from the project that we're talking about here. We can do both at the same time. So, of course, we're going to be encouraging those projects, and I believe, and I didn't finish what I wanted to say earlier on, but the role of the economy is going to be able to help for the hibernation period. And as soon as it starts again, and there's going to be cash flow problems because the supply chain will have been filled, there's going to be issues of liquidity to start operations again. We're going to intervene then as well. And at some point, we're going to want to relaunch the economy as well because there are projects that will have been put on the ice. And you're right. Not everybody is spending right now. Those who want to spend, we encourage them. But those who don't want to spend, they're going to come back very quickly because the economy was going very well before the crisis. So we have to be ready to activate that relaunch, which is just as important. If you'll allow me a question before we go to a written question sent by a colleague, Mr. Legault, there are scenarios circulating about the rate of unemployment. Some say that the unemployment rate could double to get to 10%. Is that part of the scenarios that you're thinking about right now? We have an economist here. Go ahead, Mr. Gérard. Well, I want to give a starting point. So in the month of February, we were essentially in full employment with a 4.5% unemployment rate. And here, once again, I understand that you want to quantify the economic impact, the jobs, the businesses, but it's going to all depend on how long this situation with public health lasts. So what is happening is we're having a contraction right now, and it's very sudden. It starts in March, but after that there will be a rebound, and it is the length of the stoppage that will quantify the number of businesses that will have difficulties, the number of employees that will need help, and that is a response from public health. And there's remarkable work being done by everybody involved, such as my colleague, Ms. McCann. And all that is in order to shorten the period that is very difficult in public health, and that will help the economy. Thank you. A question now. A written question. What is happening with the capitals invested by the Caisse de dépôt in the Cirque du Soleil? Well, listen, there's an issues of liquidities and shareholdership, whether it be Cirque du Soleil or others. Of course, that is being maintained. But we are going to be giving at the issues of liquidities of the Cirque as well as a financial intervention to allow them to get through the period where there won't be any shows. So if there's a need of capitals, of clean capitals for the company, we'll see that it'd be a separate exercise. For the time being, we are looking only at the short-term liquidities to be able to get through the crisis. We have time for a second turn of questions. What is the first sector where there's the greatest emergency? Mr. Legault, you talked about a few sectors, but have you targeted a sector of our economy which is going to be the most at risk right now? Well, the most at risk clearly is going to be the regional businesses. These are people who mainly see their traffic lower drastically. Of course, systemically, there are manufacturing companies that have problems with supplies and delivery. So there's a lot of strategic factors. Of course, for us, it's to know what sector we're going to be involved in. We have to cover all sectors, as I said, but there are companies that are going to go into a mode where they're not going to be operating for a certain amount of time. So we have to make sure there's a foundation here. I'm also looking at the key sectors, aerospatial, life sciences. There are sectors where we don't want things to stop. So there's two approaches, and we have to be able to look at both. But, our industrial regroupments and the aerospatial industry, satellite, life sciences, artificial intelligence, that has to continue because that will be the engine of the economy once it starts again. Yes, and there's also tourism, hotels. Of course, it is hard right now for hotels and the tourist sector in its entirety, really very hard. So I will take advantage of the presence of the finance minister. For many days, we have been asked, especially those 70 years and over, to stay at home. But they're still very numerous, and I don't want to, be prejudiced, but there are many of them who go into the kiosks in the shopping malls to have their lottery tickets validated, for example, to buy them as well. Have you thought about the possibility of telling L'Auto-Québec, stop that, suspend your operations for now? I would tell you that for everything that we do, we are following the instructions of public health. So I was asked the same question this morning for the SAQ. So as long as public health says that businesses are open, so this is a guideline that is applicable to everyone. and to all. I understand what you are mentioning for lottery tickets, and there are others that might judge alcohol consumption, etc. But the guideline on the part of public health right now is that businesses are open, and we are letting people make their own decisions. And I must say that on the Loto-Québec side and the SEQ, we have directors, we have boards, and they are responsible to take decisions and to make sure that the employees are safe, and the clients as well. And what I can see right now is that it is done well. Yes, in the restaurant world, people have been hit. A lot of restaurants may close. A lot of people are temporarily laid off. The measures that you're announcing today, might restaurants benefit from it? If so, how? Once again, I think that we have to first and foremost, employees have to be treated correctly. So, of course, helping a company while employees do not work, I think that it's better to have the social net that is going to support those employees. Secondly, we're going to be looking at measures like rents in the case where they rent. We're going to look at measures with banks in order to lighten the financial burden, such as personal loans. Very often, these companies, they have personal loans, and the banks to date have done very good work. We have not yet instituted that the government would get involved to guarantee personal loans. I hope that we're not going to be going there. But today, what I can see for those small businesses, the banks are doing very good work. And listen, when there's going to be chains of restaurants or others, we'll see if there's anything to be done on that sector. But we want to be careful to also not end up in 250,000 companies in Quebec to give liquidities if it's not required. We have to be very careful with public monies. Are you thinking of closing or asking for the closure of businesses that are considered to be non-essential when there's going to be a beginning of community transmission? That is a decision that is in the hands of public health. I told you earlier on, the priority of priorities is health. Of course, it doesn't mean that we're not taking care of the economy, but we are going to do everything in order to save as many lives as possible in Quebec. So I religiously listen to Dr. Arruda and the decision, and first and foremost, a health decision.
Vous me permettrez une dernière petite question, si vous voulez. Dans le cas, par exemple,
in the case of a person who's an independent worker, who is in a private daycare at home, and many people have been asking for questions for the Ministry of Family. But is that going to help for that, that kind of person who's an autonomous worker but is now offering, daycare? Well, we are analyzing the program that was announced yesterday, although we don't have all the details yet, the federal program. So that program is not only for those who are eligible to employment insurance, but as well to independent workers. And we are seeing to have a meeting tonight with Jean Boulet to see whether we might not come and improve the offering of the federal government. But it's difficult to do so as long as we don't have the full details. We're now ready to go to English questions.
How do you feel about the fact that, Mr. Fitzgibbon, because you talked about domestic market, and Premier Legault is asking Quebecers to buy locally, so how important it is for Quebecers to make that shift right now?
Well, as you may remember, in our three economic development pillars, one pillar we had was to reduce the commercial deficit that we have, which is $20 billion. So we do it two ways. We export more or we import less. I would say that given what's going on right now, it's probably the occasion to start to reduce our imports. And actually, whether it's in the agro side, whether it's in even retail chains. I'm talking to some retailers right now that have some the chains of retailers that have some liquidity issue. And I say to them, well, I'm ready to help you, providing we can get you in a different place on the digitalization of the business, or are you able to insource your products in Quebec? If either or is materializing, I'll be much more willing to assist than if we just import product from China, or for any country for that matter. So I think, given that some companies have liquidity issue, if you can use that to favor insourcing within Quebec, clearly that will be the driver that will get us a greater appetite to subsidize or to help the financial distress.
Monsieur Phil Autier, The Gazette.
Mr. Fitzgibbon, where would you say we are the most vulnerable at this point? In which sector of the economy?
Well, there's two answers. I think short term, I talk about hibernation, if it's an English word, but we have some enterprises, now the retailers or the restaurant, that are very vulnerable because it's shut down. So we have to shut them down and help them to be in a position where when this reopens, they're going to quickly get back. But beside that, there's some industries that, aerospace for sure, I'm concerned. There's some industries where we have some knowledge. We don't want to lose that knowledge. Because if we lose knowledge, and those, we're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive because it's the nucleus of what Quebec is all about. Artificial intelligence, aerospace, life science, tourism, I think, as Mr. Legault mentioned, is an important industry. So we have to be very sensitive to those industries because we know it's going to stop. China is reopening its shows in the end of April, so we know it's going to come back. It's a doomsday, but I mean, we're going to get out of this. And the economy was strong before we got into it, so we need to be careful that when we're going to be coming out of the U shape, we're going to be lifting ourselves. So I think we have to be careful with those core assets of ours. And
Mr. Legault, how much of a bounce can the economy get just by people buying Quebec products? Do you anticipate a fairly... Because so far, when you've made
I think it's a good question for Eric.
Okay.
He's an economist, and he knows better than I do with the percentage of the economy coming from the consumption.
I do not have the precise answer to your question, but I do want to emphasize that what we're seeing is disruption, interruption. It's not destruction. So yes, there is a pause. Some sectors of the economy are struggling, and we're there to help. What Pierre is announcing today is going to help. What the federal government's announced is going to help. What we're doing with the postponement, deferral of tax payment will help. It's increasing the monetary base. So all that we're doing is to help during the difficult period. But right now, there's no destruction. It's a disruption. Once the public health situation normalizes, the economy is going to normalize and it will bounce. Pierre mentioned the size of our imports. A lot of that import is going to be difficult to replace because it's oil consumption. And our oil comes from Western Canada and the U.S., and people will still consume oil and gas.
One last question from the gentleman from CTV. How long will it take for business people to get their benefits, and how easy it will be to navigate the system to sign up for these helps?
Well, I think as it relates to the loan guarantee, I think we can be effective because we're going to piggyback on the bank credit education. So the banks already have a relationship. They're going to extend credit, and we have bilateral arrangement with the banks where we're going to be sharing the risk. So that will be done in a few days. On the other hand, if an SME comes to Investissement Québec, which we will do, and we have to set up a new loan arrangement with them, that would take a couple of weeks. And that's why I'm urging the companies to work with their institutions. It's going to be much more quicker. When in any event they want to come directly to us, we will be there as well. But they will have to account for a couple of weeks because it's just virtually impossible to do it in a few days.
Messieurs, merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Bonne soirée.
Thank you, gentlemen.